Hello, hello. Hopefully I got that audio working here. Can I see it in? Wish I could see audio levels on the YouTube dashboard. A couple streams ago, I had a guest and I was messing around with my audio settings, and I feel like I don't know if I didn't save it or what, but I feel like it's been like slightly broken every time I go to use it. And I go, okay, time to go. Let's hit the start button, and then it's not doing what I'm expecting it to. So hopefully we are getting audio. Because y'all should be getting audience mix. I think we got it. I think we got it right. Today, stream day Tuesday. What are we doing today? We are doing kind of an exploration of egui. On a previous stream, which I'm pretty sure I linked in the description below, we did I guess I would call it a first look at the tauri-egui integration. Egui is in a GUI library written in Rust, and where you run it, where you put that GUI, is quite flexible, which is a very interesting pattern. And one of the integrations is Tauri, where we take eGUI and we put this GUI into a Tauri app. So inside of a Tauri window, and then it all gets packaged up and everything. But there's other integrations, which is really interesting. I would like to explore what this abstraction looks like, and maybe how specifically look into the code that's in tauri-egui to see specifically what's being implemented there, and how we're taking this egui thing that has multiple render targets and pointing it into something that you can view. Let's go over here. I didn't open up. Okay, that's fine. We might have it. Nope. It's fine. egui Rust, I think will give it to us. Yes. Here we go. Alright. I thought that's how we spelt it, but I was not sure if I was remembering that correctly. Okay. So if you go to their main page, I can drop a link in the chat here. Well, actually, it's in the description below. I don't even need to do that. I was gonna say, the Streambots messaged in, I guess could be either, I suppose, depending on how you're viewing this. The Streambots message didn't show up. Well, integrations is where we're looking. So what an integration does is it input runs the application code, output, and then painting. It's built to integrate into any existing game engine and platform. So sort of that makes it OS independent. And it doesn't care where it's running, just that it is able to render to the screen. So the input is whatever integration you're using, that needs to be able to collect input and then send it off to egui. So if we look at some of these integrations here, Amethyst, Bevy are game engines. I believe Volcano is as well, another 2D game framework. There's Winit integrations, which is a window. So like a browser would be a window with content, and all of those are the thing. Oh, they have a WGPU too. That I'm actually a little bit curious about. That API's taken some time and it's finally seems like it's landing. So interesting from a different use case. There's like 1,000 things that are interesting, you know, and this isn't necessarily interesting for what we're looking at today, but interesting as far as I'm curious how that API has come along and how it fits into how Egui is using it. Anyways, we got Godot. We have a lot of game frameworks. It seems like a lot of games. Some of these I don't recognize. Gluten and Winit. And Gluium are all windowing libraries. Tauri is doing that as well as some packaging, and it allows you to do web views as well as what Egui enables. Glow, it looks like, is native and web. So if we click over to Glow, okay, GL, OpenGL. Interesting. OpenGL, OpenGL-ES, and WebGL. So any GL and theoretically location independent. Oh, they don't have anything else here. What do we got for example? So this is a Wasm and they're using a canvas. And it looks like what they're doing is they've got different targets. So this is only going to be compiled if it's gluten. This is only going to be compiled if it's Wasm. So we've got this like it's the builder pattern, I think it's called. And then we have the actual like shaders, which are independent of the target that it's getting compiled. So this whole thing returns a glow or GL, and then once we have whatever target, we can actually execute some GL things like shaders. Yeah, and more shaders. That's kind of nifty. So with something like this, Glow ends up giving us both native and web. Web would be Wasm, in which case you would have to have things to load the Wasm. I don't know if that's something that they provide. I'm guessing based off of the README here that they probably just create a Wasm file and you need to figure out how to like load it into the browser and actually use it. And then what would be native? If we look at, I'm guessing this is probably a workspace. I got some examples. I guess it is not. Nope, it's not. SRC. SRC and examples. So it's using its own, or it's using a log library. And we have dependencies based off of what you're compiling to, which makes sense. So WASM bindgen. WASM bindgen is the thing that's doing the WASM part of it. And it creates the like little bootstrappy code that's required to actually import and use the WASM in the browser. I'm not sure how WebSys is used. And I don't see any way to do it. Just says native. So like, what does native include? And I haven't done too much game development. If I would almost qualify it as next to none. We have game engines, and then we have, and that provides a way to like render things. So you give it. Usually, the game engine will give you APIs to like do all the shader work and whatnot. But here we're writing our own shaders, and if we have some way to create an OpenGL context, I presume you'd be able to view whatever shaders or whatnot you would program. Oh, this is really long. I'm curious how they're doing the window part of it, though. So we need some way to contain the GL thing, I believe. Unless the expectation is that this is only going to be full screen, which maybe not. I'm not sure, to be honest. I haven't dug into windowing enough to know offhand. So I'm guessing GL46, yeah, is bindings. We also have lib. That looks like it has a bunch of enums and traits. Consts. So they're definitely not small. And what's a WebSys? This one's also really big. So if we look at the, let's say the how-to. This is, oh, from an SD12 window. Okay. I have no idea what SD12 is. So if we look at the cargo toml again, what do we have? We have slot map, JSys, WASM bindgen, that's all WASM. Doesn't specifically say anything about dependencies elsewhere. So if we, let's go ahead and throw SD12 in It is, or is it SDL? SDL. if we go to the Windows crate, do they have an SDL? Oh, interesting. You just have it like hosted on their site. Okay. SDL 2. All right. So it doesn't show up there, so maybe it's not. It looks like it's a very like established way to do a window. I wonder if some of the like Winit and whatnot are basically using this, and Glow is doing it directly. So I'd imagine that would, purely speculation, I'm gonna assume that there's no SDL. Is it under here? Yeah, well, that's fine. Okay, so this example is doing SDL2. Is that in the Rust standard library? Because I want the API. Rust SDL2. Okay. Video subsystem. So it's making a window directly. I don't know how much flexibility we specifically have as far as like decorations on the window. So the chrome and whatnot, like this up here and such. Hey John, good to see you again. Yeah, it's so what is really interesting, if you're just tuning in here, is the expectation that egui is not gathering input. It's not painting, but it's just doing like the rendering. So it sort of does that the middle layer, and you can theoretically wrap it in whenever you want, which has enabled a bunch of these interesting use cases like game engines, but also web and Windows. Window as in not the OS, but program Windows. It's really interesting. So we're sort of like exploring around those edges. We're looking at Glow right now, and Glow does WASM for web using WASM bindgen. And native, it looks like it makes an STL2 window, which I haven't worked with before, but it looks like it's a Rust standard thing and a way to render a OpenGL context. And then we've got, I guess we'll kind of stick with the official integrations for the moment, but okay, so eFrame also does WASM and native. Oh, okay. So eFrame is sort of a helper on top of Glow, WGPU, and Winit. Let's look at the egui WGPU. So WGPU is natively supported backends. Not quite sure what that means. Oh. So we have options. I kind of assumed that WGPU implied web GPU. Yeah, because they say web GPU API. But it looks like it also allows us to do... Okay, so GL. So that must be the SDL too. These other ones, though, I definitely recognize. DX11, DX12 would be DirectX. Those are quite common for games to run. Metal, I believe, is Mac, the Mac version of like DirectX. And then Vulkan is supposed to be, I believe it's the open source-ish version of those. Let's go ahead and... Yeah, and this... Oh, it's newer than I expected. I feel like it had been wrong for long. I mean, I guess that's a handful of years now. What are we? 2003? So 7 years? Okay, I guess that is a little bit making me feel old here, Vulkan. I don't know specifically where it started, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Vulkan tends to see integration with various flavors of Linux based off of its open source nature. Let's just double check on Metal. Don't know if Metal runs on Linux. Of course. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. Metal. What do I even search for? Frame? No, it's not a framework. Just say GPU. Oh, well, that's not helping me out at all. We have an Apple article here with the Metal debugger, so I think that... Yep, okay, it's definitely an Apple thing. I did remember correctly. Hardware accelerated graphics on Apple platforms. So if you're running games on Mac, I don't know if it actually supports the other ones, but I'm pretty sure that the expectation that is that it's running within Metal. If you're running on Linux, Vulkan is probably likely, but I believe there's integrations of DX11 and 12 on Linux. Don't quote me on that. GL seems pretty cross-platform as far as I can tell, and then web GPU would be the web. And here, so WGSL is the main shading language of WGPU. Did you catch the Rust Foundation changes? Yeah, let me just get through this. We can touch on that real quick. I don't mind a little bit of a distraction there. So I think this is something that we want to come back to on stream. I don't think we want to dive into this any further, but this crate specifically, but also web GPU, are kind of interesting because I think it allows you to write WGSL shaders and use them on the web. prior to this, it was more desktop. So what we could do in the browser was limited by like the APIs that WebGL supported. I think this gets us closer to I guess I wouldn't say closer to like writing on the metal, but this opens up the amount of, or the APIs, or the way that we interface with and draw graphics in the browser. So it gives us options. Okay, so shader conversion. So GLSL is so WGSL is the new thing that goes with WGPU. I'm not sure what the W is here, but I think it's graphics shader language. And then GLSL is the GL and WebGL shader language. So I think with WebGL or WebGPU landing, we now have basically 2 ways to write shaders, I believe. I know some of this, and I'm very like fuzzy in details. I know like the high level, which is partly why I want to jump into this on a stream and give it at least a stream or two for to digest. Okay, so I think that about covers the WGPU. That's one of the ways that they're supporting. So we know Glow is doing this SDL2 directly. I wanted to look quick at and see what egui WGPU is using as far as like the thing creating the window. Okay, so there is a winit here. I am curious. What so there's winit, which does windowing. And then there's WGPU, which also has winit. egui. Okay. Oh, okay. So this would be a .wgl or WGSL, which is like the shader language basically. So they're writing a shader here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that is. I'm guessing it's in there as sort of an example. Okay, so there's a winit here. So it is using winit. How is this set up? Initialize window. Do some window positioning. Clamp window to sane position. Okay, so it's sort of trying to open and place the window in a place that makes sense. All off the initialization. And what does this lib do? Real quick, what other dependencies we have? Puffin, Serday, Wayland. Wayland is a graphics on Linux. It's the Wayland. Nope. It's a display driver. Is it technically a driver? Protocol, communication protocol. Okay, so I don't think it's specifically like the driver, but it's the language that a client speaks to display drivers. Let's see, what else do we got? Web browser, some clipboard stuff. Interesting, some Android stuff. And this is all within Winit. So it seems like the Winit integration is more than just Winit, and they're looking to enable some other things. I don't believe that this is although that could be for like Chromebook or something. Possible. But also we've got Wasm here as well. So it looks like the egui WGPU has multiple render targets, and it has Winit specifically for like a framed window, and that is for the most part all it's doing, which I think makes sense to me. That would map to like you open up a launcher for a game, the launcher starts the game can run in like framed or windowless. Windowless would be like full screen, and if you need a frame, then it is generally a very plain, low decorated like chrome that goes around the thing that you're trying to render. So a very small amount of options as far as the Winit integration makes sense to me, because we just need like a little container, and I don't think there's any expectation that we're doing more than that. But maybe that's where the Winit integration starts to come in. Okay. Oh, what is? Whoa. What happened there? They like rendered two of them on top of each other. Weird. Okay, so you're all the way up at the top. Let's touch on that first before we go off on a complete digression. Think about eguing a project where the customer wants a more native experience, native Windows. So egui isn't necessarily the thing that is going to give you the window. It has integrations that allow egui to be rendered within a window. So I think maybe the thing to think about there is, do you want to handle your Rust or do you want to handle your interface in a GL context and render it in GL through writing Rust? If the answer is yes, then egui might make sense. And then it seems like the decision is, how do you want to wrap the thing? I'm guessing a more native experience does not imply a game, so you have a few options. There are official integrations. We worked on a Tauri integration. I don't know what Ash is. And then I'd presume that some of these are very like low level windows and not too much more. So things to think about. How do you want to do your interface, and what do you want to do your interface in? The thing with egui and GL is you can make it look nice. The value of a web view, depending on what you're doing, is that you are using web APIs, web view, or Electron or whatnot have you. The design and layout through CSS seems to be so much further along than anything done natively. So there's a handful of ways you can do native interfaces. Through GL seems to be one of the ways, and eGUI is specifically in immediate mode type GUI. It renders everything on every frame, which is part of why, as opposed to retain mode, you show the button and you interact with it immediately, and you do it on every frame. And I guess they're frame limiting it to 60 per second. But the reason you would use this, or the reason is immediate mode ends up being valuable, is that's very much how games work. They re-render everything every frame. I think it's starting to become more complex than that, but as opposed to the retained, which would be more of the CSS. So you can make it look nice, but you're definitely losing out on the APIs that come from CSS and all of the effort that's gone into moving CSS as a language forward, and as a styling paradigm. So, that's sort of your trade-offs. In everything that I've looked at, I haven't found a personal use case where I would need anything that would be provided by rendering it directly in GL or whatnot, as opposed to all the value that I get from using something that would allow me to write CSS. I'm sure there's situations, and it's definitely what you're most comfortable with. I wouldn't necessarily make that choice strictly based on performance reasons, though. You could probably make a sweeping statement that doing it all in Rust and rendering directly to, using a shader rendering directly to like a GL context is going to be the fastest. But it is very much, I get a lot of people who don't understand that trade-off, and they think web pages. Yeah, and like that paradigm is sort of, it's comfortable. And I think not only is that it's almost like in the Apple ecosystem, they have very established like patterns. People that are used to using Apple products notice when an app doesn't follow those ecosystem like patterns and expectations. And it feels like it's almost becoming to the point where the web is, we've hit the point of proliferation where the web is sort of like an expected pattern. And that it's starting to actually take over native expectations. Everything's going to have trade-offs. Whatever's going to allow you to ship the thing fastest. Like there's companies now that have written things in Electron, seen where they could benefit from performance improvements, and are making switches. I think like Microsoft Teams is being rewritten to use a web view instead of Electron. So they're not completely getting rid of CSS, but that architecture and moving out of specifically JavaScript as the thing wrapping everything might allow them to improve the performance. So everything has trade-offs. I think there's definitely a conversation to be had, and how much are you going to benefit from having CSS available versus writing it directly in GL. And then the window or the wrapper of it is going to be a whole separate thing too. Yeah, WebView C# and or C++. Yeah. I mean, I'm it's Windows. I guess I'm not surprised. It is valuable from a Microsoft putting a lot of effort and support into pushing WebView 2 forward as a target. And I think that further validates Tauri using WebViews, but also like WebView as a pattern rather than effectively being forced to ship like embedded Chromium in every project. So, not everything needs to be written in Rust, I guess. and like C#, C++, it probably comes down to they have a lot of devs that are familiar with that paradigm. And that's their ecosystem, so it makes sense for them to continue to put effort into it. I think that was... Did we cover everything? Yeah, so they want a more native experience, native Windows. I mean, if you have a web app already, you could theoretically just wrap that web app and ship that and iterate from there. And I think that's also sort of an interesting point too, is like with the Tauri integration, at least when Tauri, definitely V0 alpha, and I think into V1, I don't know if we're changing that, but the expectation is that the main loop is like a WebView window, and I think with the way that eGUI is going, where it's focused on a very specific task and whatever you wrap the window with doesn't really matter. I think it allows for some interesting use cases where you can have a web view for the things where it makes sense. But then if you need something that isn't web view, you can use something like eGUI, and you can use them in the same app, which is really interesting. Java Swing apps. Is that Java Swing? I think I've was it Spring or Spring Boot? I feel like I've interfaced with that a lot. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Using the web in many cases. Interesting. Oh. So are you saying that you're converting from Java Swing app into a web app that they're expecting to use through a browser? Or are you saying Java Swing apps with like a web wrapper? Is the converting? Okay, I would say because Java Swing I think is primarily like its own GUI abstraction. Yeah, it's a GUI GUI WebKit toolkit. That is not easy to say. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine that's probably fine for most cases, but there's some cases where actually having a native app is beneficial as well, which is probably why your client is talking about that. That makes sense to me. That makes sense. Okay, so I want to come back and look a little bit at the WGPU versus WinIt separation, but distraction now wherever it's not in the chat anymore. I need to do a highlighting thing still. I haven't pulled over my highlight chat integration, but we had you John, you were asking about the Rust Foundation changes. Rust Foundation drama. I think there's a definitely a handful of things to keep in mind, and I would argue that this kind of media attention is not helpful. And as I understand, there's definitely ways. As I haven't actually read through the whole thing, but as I understand all of the drama around it, I think a lot of it is just around the messaging more than anything, and the way that the foundation interacts with the maintainers. So it was created as a draft. This is like a forum. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Okay. So this is the comment thing, I believe. So it is very specifically like, we want comments on this, but also it's not easy to work in public, and I think they kind of blindsided a lot of the community as well. It seems like it was talked about in working groups and whatnot, so it's not like it was like hidden away in private necessarily. But languages and projects get so big that things get siloed, and it's not easy. So like I get where these things can kind of fall down and not go as smoothly as one would hope. But I don't know that. This is really long, isn't it? I guess we can keep this open. I don't know that it is as big of a deal as it feels like people are making it. Because what they're doing is, I think this is a lot about just clarifying the trademark law, and that's sort of an established legal pattern where you take a trademark and a trademark would be like a logo, or this is not legal advice, by the way, logo or a thing, and you go to a specific government and they give you a trademark for it, presuming you meet certain criteria. And one of the stipulations of the trademark is, for you to maintain said trademark, you need to defend your use of it, which means that if you don't legally enforce you owning this trademark, you could lose it. And that's always been a thing. Like, that's pretty established trademark law from what I understand. So like, this has always been the case. They have a trademark on the logo. I think what they're trying to do is, apparently I didn't put my phone on silent. Come on. I think part of this is that they're trying to clarify, so people are aware of like this being a thing. Technically, cases where if people have modified the logo, that is something that they could potentially say, hey, you need to stop that, cut it out. And even if nobody wants that, from a legal standpoint, they need to do some of that to be able to sort of keep their trademark enforced. Others, they're going to end up losing it. I don't know that we're definitely not going to solve any issues as far as trademark law goes. But I think the thing that they're specifically saying, let's see if we can find it. So, trademark universal considerations. I mean, this is all like very straight trademark law. Do not use it. Yeah. Oh, and they interesting. They have yeah, like this is all very established trademark law. Like they're literally just saying this is how the law works, and this is something that as the foundation owning the trademark, we need to at least make it known or somehow enforce some of it for us not to lose this trademark. You can grant licenses to use of the trademark. And it can either be on a case-by-case basis, or they can kind of do these like little blanket things like adding patches made available upstream. Interesting. Okay. So they do say Rust is fine. And will most likely require license. That doesn't necessarily mean that like you need to pay us. Although as a foundation they theoretically could. But basically they want to say, hey, we're enforcing it by either going after people that are misusing it in a way that we don't deem appropriate, or that we have granted them a license, either from something like this or explicitly said, based on this use case and us looking at this specific use case, you get a license for that use. We have some other situations, and like this is where things start to get in, like promotional goods. If you have some company just making random coffee mugs with the Rust logo on it, and I don't think this is the type of stuff that people are really taking issue to. I think the big part of it is Rust and crate names, I think, is kind of the thing that people are really taking issue to. Yeah, the crates part. Yeah, and Linux had to, and that's entirely common. Tauri has a trademark on, yeah, the Tauri program has a trademark, and the Apache 2 license allows for that. They're like, the Apache 2 license is pretty well established at this point on it. There's literally wording in there that just allows use of the trademark in that license. And I think that's the part where the messaging can be improved. I was trying to find it. Do you remember where that was? Proper trademark use. Yeah, and like, you may not change any logo except to scale it. So it's very unlikely, I would say, that they're going to go after somebody that's running or interacting with a Discord server that has people in it that do Rust, and that they've made little stickers or emojis that take the logo and they get a rainbow or something. They don't have to enforce it on literally everything, because that would just not be sustainable. They just need to have some history of showing that they're trying to enforce and keep their trademark, which is very wishy-washy, but yeah. And like this, I think this comes into case too, like the likelihood of confusion. Somebody making a rainbow Rust emoji probably isn't going to hit on much of these And I think technically it could be something that they could enforce and tell them to take it down. But it's not a case that's really going to hit on any of these where if they don't, it's actually going to lead to them eventually losing the trademark. But I think let's give it a scroll through. Okay, so they've got Rust Foundation, Rust Comp, which are in like separate documents, basically. RS is pretty common, so people aren't gonna have an issue about that. I think specifically with the crates part, so using Rust in a crate. I'll just keep scrolling as I'm talking, but I think the issue with that is that there's established crates that are using that already, that paradigm already, and it kind of feels like they're using this trademark policy as a way to say, hey, we want to use that as an official namespace. And it feels like they're conflating these two things. If that's something that they want to do, fine, but I think that should be a separate discussion from the trademark. Because the trademark is a thing, they need to enforce it, fine. But establishing a new pattern in crates, I think, is a whole separate issue. As part of that, they could bring up the fact that, yes, we own the trademark and theoretically we need to enforce it. But it feels like making that a driving factor is awkward. So overall, I think it's a lot of this is just messaging. It's gotten a lot longer. Legal things are not easy. You set up a foundation, they have more time and resources to theoretically make this more involved and reduce the potential liability on the foundation and prevent things from happening where it could hurt or otherwise destroy the foundation and the language. So like these kind of things are going to happen, but I think a lot of this is a messaging issue. Messaging and then the crates part. Pull out the crates part in a separate discussion, and I think this would have been a lot less of a drama, as it were. So I don't know. I think overall, not a big deal. It is still a draft. I suspect they are going to take the feedback. But I don't know what. I think all the feedback is going to be, we want Rust in crate names. I think they're just gonna maybe be less specific about it in this, and I suspect that'll end up becoming a different conversation. At least that's what would make sense to me. So, again, all personal opinion. That opinion is not representing anybody else, but I've talked with a handful of other people, and it seems that is kind of the feeling that everybody's getting, is that most of the drama or the emotions around it are having created specifically in a name, rather than like we need to fix trademark law, which would be a whole other rabbit hole. Okay, speaking of rabbit holes, I don't know that. Okay, I agree it will run around. I did see a keynote recently that they say they welcome disagreement. Yep, it's a draft. It's not like they're saying this is the thing we're gonna do. Good luck. Good luck, have fun kind of situation. It's a draft. I think they could have just gone about it better. It does seem like it's a combination of people are there's emotions running with the create name part of it, prior established patterns, and potentially using the trademark to establish a new pattern of naming crates where the standard library could have Rust as like their namespaced thing effectively. But also, like, I think it was a bit of a blindside. They were working in a working group separate from everybody else, and like it seems like, you know, big foundation, a fair number of people that are working on this. Something like this might have been worth saying, hey, we're going to be putting this out. I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe, you know, you get busy, you miss stuff. I don't know any of the background. I'm not worried as far as the language goes, though. I think they'll figure it out. Okay, so egui again. We've kind of given all the official integrations a bit of a look, and it seems like some of them are also doing like SDL2. Oh, it's actually okay. So it does actually point to it. Great. Okay. We have a bunch of engines. GLFW. Is that another GL window? Okay. So it seems like GLFW is very much so X11 and Wayland are two communication protocols that allow a client to speak to the display drivers. I believe I'm getting that language correct. Gluten is another windowing library, I believe. Gluten is so I guess that's specifically an OpenGL context creation library, but it doesn't provide the OpenGL bindings. So there's a bunch of different like GUI and or windowing libraries. Iced and Druid, I think, are other common ones. I know Qt. OBS, the program that I'm using to stream, is, I believe, Qt. And then we've got a bunch of macro quad and mini quad. Oh, okay. Okay, so metal's not supported, but these are all the other things. Focusing, and if you did notice the theme, everything is GL. egui is specifically expecting GL. This is all like WebGL or WGPU, WGSL shaders. So effectively we're doing GUI with shaders, which there's things about that a library like this ends up having to support that something programmed for the web doesn't, because CSS handles centering text, which is apparently a very hard thing because it took CSS a while to give us enough hooks to handle that nicely. Oh, Mini Quad also does Android and iOS. Interesting. Oh, this is put out by Embark. Okay. How about Macro Quad? No, excuse me, not put out by. It's supported by. I'm guessing sponsorship type of support. Embark is a company that is primarily a video game studio, I believe, and So this is their new game coming up, which seems actually pretty fun. Do they have... They have a link somewhere. I believe they do a lot of Rust. I don't know what their whole stack looks like, but they do a lot of Rust, including, oh, here we go, open source. They've got a bunch of libraries. What Rust GPU? There we go. Puffin. I just noticed. I think the WGPU has Puffin in it. I was curious what that was. Puffin is a CPU profiler. There's physics. Oh. Blender tools. Embark add-on for Blender. So we have done some Blender on stream. Embark.dev. That's, I think, what I was looking for. Oh, that's what that's this. And we did some of these. And so that is React 3 Fiber, which is a wrapper around 3GS, which is a wrapper around WebGL. And those are all made through Blender, and we did those on stream. Go and watch the videos or the streams that we did on those. I haven't touched it for a while, so I guess there's nothing. It's just a tool set. I don't think there's anything specifically that I would be interested in. Okay, Rust at Embark. Okay, they do specifically state that it's their primary language, which that's a big part of the reason why I've kind of kept up with them. And they've got a lot of like cargo deny. I've heard of that outside of like all the ways that I've heard about them being connected with other things that are interesting. They've got a handful of libraries though, so like they seem to support the Rust ecosystem in general too, which is appreciated. Benchmarks, OAuth. Interesting. Interesting. RP malloc. Presser. Huh. I might want to come back to Puffin. Benchmarking and seeing performance characteristics of programs, I think, is something that I would be interested in learning more about, but also in a way that could improve that space for Tauri. That might be something that we want to come back around to and look at. Rust binding for NVIDIA physics. Oh. That seems kind of nifty. So the auto merge relies on branch protection rules. The type of PR, I think, dictates the type of review or the amount of people or the group that you want reviewing it. And I don't think it's specifically something that you can tie to a specific file. So like if you're doing CI/CD and you're doing a publish workflow where you're going to do a deploy on this commit, that review and the people reviewing it are going to be that's going to have different requirements than having any random PR get merged in. Interesting. GitHub action schedules can be delayed by up to 30 minutes. Interesting. Run the binary. So I guess this thing just it actually does auto merges. Okay. Which might actually be less useful now because GitHub has gotten the merge key working. So when you're doing, I think it's more specifically an issue with Rust because of the long compile times. So if you're building and testing in CI and you've got 3 or 4 PRs that want to land, theoretically every time you land a new PR, you should retest all the old ones. Boars was a way that the Rust community was handling some of that pain, because that would allow, that was a bot that would take multiple PRs that were in a queue, pull them off to the side, and try running them all at the same time. And if anything breaks, just peel one off at a time and try to have a merge include more than one PR, but have that merge include all like updated Git information, but basically like taking all of these things and merging them into one branch and like testing that branch as a thing, building that whole thing and testing that whole thing, so you don't have this like chain reaction where you merge one in and then all the other ones technically need to update, but only rule 1 really needs to update before you get that merged in, and then you get this like long queue of things. GitHub now is, I think, still rolling out the merge queue, which I think will end up making this boars and auto merge situation less painful. So anyways, we are like down multiple rabbit holes here. A wrapper for Cloud DNS, interesting. Utility wrappers for tracked. What's tracked? I have not heard of tracked. Sonos neural network interface engine. TensorFlow thing. Interesting. Rust Conserve is really nice. Was that on the list? Or is that just a completely side tangent? Not saying that's a bad thing, but I feel like either I missed some context or it's a side tangent. Ash Molten, statically linking Molten VK for Vulkan on Mac using Ash. Oh, interesting. And I think Vulkan is an interesting thing, it being open source. I don't know that it does specifically yet, or at least in a way that is seeing any widespread adoption. Vulkan is very much in the Linux ecosystem because open source. But I think there is effort to make it work on Mac and Windows as well. And I don't know the status of it. I think it does work on all of them, but not in a way that has seen enough widespread adoption where it's like upserting DirectX. You're using so you're using Time Machine for your backups, and you're using Rust Conserve and Helix on Windows. Helix RS. That was not what I was hoping for. Rust Conserve. Oh yeah. Yep, this might be it. Okay. Okay, so you kind of just oh, that's pretty nifty. Is it like a rsync type? Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah, so like this is the thing that always kind of worries me with anything data or backup related. Even if it, like, I would be perfectly comfortable using any like hacky mishmash of stuff to handle backups if it is like super well established and used by a big community. Yeah, backups are just one of those things that, like, the stability is such a huge thing. Helix editor. Oh, Helix editor. Okay. Windows has terrible built-in tools. Yeah. Yeah. I've done a few utilities and whatnot to do that. A lot of the things that I do now are so there's a lot of nuance, I guess, here. So like for me, it's very dependent on like what is the thing that I'm backing up. So all of my dev related things are pretty much handled by Git now. So like I lose my dev folder as long as I don't have any like commits or anything I pushed up. I didn't really lose anything. I record all these. Those are big. Those don't fit in Git. Those also don't necessarily make sense to throw on something like Google Drive, because there's sort of like diminishing value to keeping it around, and they're very large. I'm hoping with new encoding technologies that is going to change a little bit, but right now I have those. I leave them on a M.2 drive on this computer, and as I like process them or get to them, then I move them over to I have an NAS, and I pretty much just do that manually, but it's like once a week, if that I'm doing that. So that's not as big of a deal. And then literally everything else I have pretty much in Google Drive. It would be annoying if I wiped my computer. And actually, on that note, I'm thinking about building a new computer, and I've been looking at parts and options, which might be something I do on the stream. We'll see. But it would be some work to install the programs again. But honestly, I don't mind doing that, because I feel like there's like old cruft and stuff that gets hanging around that's starting from a fresh install of an operating system. As long as you have a list of the programs that you had, I tend to just install them as I need them. So then at that point, if I'm not doing any, if I only am backing up the metadata and the context around all of these programs, Google Drive, I guess technically the NAS and Git. I don't know what else I would need. I can maybe use this for something like my video files or whatnot. But for the most part, like I'm not doing like diff type things where that's gonna make a difference. It's like a big chunk in video file, and it was there, now it's, or it was not there, and now it's there. And like, I'm not doing much where like having a diff cache is gonna make a difference. And also, like, that being said, if I would dive into this any deeper, having like an automatic backup system that isn't like, you know, through Google Drive or Git, I think I would use something like either like a built-in, like a lot of the NASAs, the sort of off-the-shelf NASAs will have software that comes with it that has their own like backup utilities. And then there's the Backblaze, I think, is pretty common. I think they've got their own client, and something like TrueNAS if you're going to build your own, which may or may not be a good idea. You need a lot of storage, and you're comfortable doing something like this, you could set up your own. And then you start to get into that, you can have multiple types of nodes and availability and ZSF compression, and diffs. USB is my NAS right now. Is the software that comes with them any good? So I have a Synology that's old. It is more than 10 years old, and it's at the point where they've stopped updating the software part of it. So I don't run the actual backup software on there anymore. So the way that I get files to it is it has a Samba or a Samba share that works with both Mac and Windows. So separate folder, separate drive, I'd copy paste, and that's how I do my backups to the NAS specifically. But it does have a syncing software suite thing, like that works very similar to Google Drive, and it worked fine. I used it for a while. I still technically have, it also runs Google Drive on it. So anything that I'm putting in Google Drive gets synced up to the Google Drive cloud, and then I think it has local sync too as well, actually. But it gets local synced through Google Drive to my NAS as well. So I have a copy of everything that's outside of the internet theoretically, on the NAS, and then GitHub and Google Drive, and I guess some Amazon stuff too are like offsite storage options for me. So like this is something, if you want to go your own build, and with a NAS, besides just a USB, the USB can work fine, but downsides are that it only works with the computer you have it plugged into, unless you're expecting to keep the computer on all the time, and then that gets complicated. And typically you don't have redundancy in a USB drive. I've got 5 drives in my Synology RAID. I can lose a drive and hot swap replace it, and it just rebuilds the whole RAID array. Stuff is gonna fail, and I've had a lot of drives fail. it's not an if, it's a when. Um, there's a low number of drives that'll fail right at the beginning, and the longer they stick around, the more likely they are to fail. And I've probably had something like over the years, I don't know, 5 drives fail, and some of them I've just replaced because they'd been on a long time and hard drive prices have come down quite a bit, so it made sense to swap them out for bigger drives. So trade-offs, but it's also another thing to maintain. So if you go with something like this, you're doing both the hardware and setting up the software and making sure to keep it up to date. My Synology is a little bit more, set it up and forget it, which is nice. Trade-offs and everything. I feel like that's broken record here. I'm talking about trade-offs all the time. Okay, so rabbit holes. Mutation testing. Interesting. Okay, so this came out of Conserve. This seems nifty. I feel like I would have trouble finding myself using this. Because I don't know what I would use it for. Maybe at some point, if I figure out how to get off of dependence on Google Drive, that's going to be difficult because Google Photos is now kind of dependent on that as well. And for better or worse, we use Google Photos. So, nifty, thanks for sharing. I don't think it would be a use case that I would specifically be interested in. Okay, digging ourselves out of the rabbit hole a little bit here. So Servo is a wrapper around Tract. So it's got some machine learning stuff in here, which is kind of interesting. I wouldn't mind doing some of this on stream, machine learning type stuff, but there's definitely things in here that I don't appreciate about the niche that is AI, which definitely causes me some hesitation to play around with some of it, but we can sort of put a pin in that for the moment, though. This is Discord game SDK. That's what I would really be interested in. So this is actually global illumination, which uses Rust GPU. Those are the things that I think that's where I first heard about Embark. And it is get as close to possible to path traced reference at real-time rates. So rather than just like using shaders or manually placing lights, actually computing if you have like the sun, how is it going to illuminate stuff, which gives you really realistic lighting, but it's very compute intensive. They've put out a few videos though that really show off where they're going with that, which is really nifty. It's a GS util. I feel like I recognize that. GS util. Python application. Oh yeah. Google Cloud. Okay. that makes sense. Yeah, there's a couple things I wouldn't mind coming back to in here. Puffin, I think, is something that I definitely would like to come back to. That might be something that we is this Helix the IDE, the other thing that you had mentioned? But keep distracting myself here. I think potentially one of the next things that we can do on stream is I'm interested in performance and Rust talking to operating system type things. And I think that would be interesting from a perspective of like, what does that look like in a Tauri app? Have Rust, monitor your CPU or do a CPU profile, and like that should generally be more performant than if you'd like try to do that with an Electron app. Because I imagine that the Rust interfaces are going to be much better. But then taking that information and just playing it in a web view, I think it would be kind of an interesting use case, and it would allow us to get into some, rather than just taking a web app and wrapping it with a window and not doing much Rust. If we have, if we're monitoring things on the operating system, that's going to give us a very strong use case for using the Rust side of Tauri setup. Okay, Helix. Is that written in Go? Oh, it is built in Rust, okay. Yeah, this does sound super familiar. Yeah, okay, yep. I feel like I heard about this when it first came out. And for multiple reasons, it wasn't something I was interested in pulling into my work chain. Okay, so it is an EUVim inspired. That tracks. That looks, I can see it. But there's things that I like to do bleeding edge, and there's things that I like stability. My data, I like stability. My IDE, which I don't even have open right now. A little bit of a mix. I could see myself playing around with terminals or IDs at some point. But the part of the value I think of VS Code is the plugin ecosystem on top of it's a very common IDE now at this point. So it works very well when working with clients, because there's sort of that common expectation that you're working with VS Code. So what? Oh, cool projects. Yeah, VS Code is really good. There are things that I would love to see better about it. Some plugins and especially some TypeScript projects that are really intensive tend to really bog it down. I don't know if it's a TypeScript language server or whatnot, but I haven't really figured it out. But there are definitely cases where I'm like, I really wish this was moving faster than it is. So it's like I have all these extensions and it's a great ecosystem, but then at some point that doesn't scale. So I think part of like moving to something like Helix would mean it is going to be faster regardless of how they did it, because I don't have 50 extensions running at the same time. And at some point, if it would support all the exact same functionality, maybe it's still faster. It's written in Rust. Rust has a good history of like raw performance. Okay, let's see, macro quad. So macro quad is more drawing things. It looks like it's just a main crate here. If we look at the cargo.toml, okay, so this is using mini quad as a dependency. So it is mini quad. Is that the thing? Okay, that seems to be the thing that is handling the view layer of it. And it looks like it does WASM with HTML, Android, iOS. They specifically say, hey, we're not doing Vulkan or DirectX 12. I think that's I appreciate that very clear scoping of the project relative to the other projects. Okay. So we've got a kind of high level like separation of like general windowing thing to run egui and game engine thing to run egui. And some of these are a little bit more flexible, like not really game, but also kinda. I don't remember what Nano is using for its. I don't remember if it is. We've got a WGPU. Oh, helpers. I don't remember if Nano is using all of its own like low-level code or if it's built on top of something else. I vaguely recall Bevy, but definitely don't quote me on that. They could very well be doing their own thing. But I think from that separation, at least the stuff that I'm particularly interested in, and we'll maybe spend another 15 minutes or so. We've looked at the tauri-egui integration as we had mentioned before, but it's for the most part it's like tauri-egui, WGPU, and a WinInt are probably the ones that I would be the most interested in diving into. I don't think this. Oh, actually, that link did go here. So, like, if we're doing, I don't remember which is which here. So this is specifically using egui and eFrame. eFrame being the thing that allows you to compile to WebWasm. So it is doing WASM in a web view. In this example would be my expectation. So if we look at the main, eFrame is the thing running the app. Okay. I do remember something about this where, let's see, read me. Yeah, I don't think this isn't actually anything with Tauri. This is specifically just like the egui demo app. I think demo is the thing that includes all the Tauri stuff, yeah. And that's using the tauri-egui eFrame and Rai to wrap like the web view stuff. Rai is the web view, and Tau is the windowing library. Tau being originally a fork of Winit, and the part of the reason behind that is that Winit, the scope that Winit had did not match the scope that we were hoping it had, and we have been trying to keep them reasonably in sync, and Tau ends up basically giving a little bit more to the situation. So I think for the most part we're going to have this situation where we have set up a thing that handles the input. So like if we look at the WGPU, that was the same situation. We had that set up, setting up like the GL context to handle the input, and then we do the egui things in between, and then we paint. So I think that's where we're going to call it for the day. I would like to, in future streams, dig into Tau and Rai a little bit more, and see what you can use those separately, and you can actually use them in other integration as well. So people have like pulled in just Rai for their situation. The Tauri kind of wraps both of them and adds some like helpers and utility and building and bundling on top of that. I think it would be fun to dig into a little bit with how on stream how Rai and Tau work, and like how they end up rolling into Tauri. So that's probably gonna be some future streams, and then the WGPU stuff. So we have some options. Great. All right, I'm gonna run next Tuesday. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we want to do. We also want to do some mobile stuff too here in the near future, but we have options. Thanks for stopping by, John. I see everybody next Tuesday. Bye.